Love feels absurd today.
Men have a more wide cast net mentality, whilst women are much more selective.
I've always said for years now that I don't have friends.
I don't commit to women who take their phones into the bathroom.
I am one of the few people in this world who may never find love.
You are unlovable. I remember those words so clearly. You are unlovable.
Do you have a six-pack?
No.
It just feels kind of weird, like it shouldn't be like this. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Dating apps have essentially become the dating scene if you look at the statistics. Most people meet online now. Of course, this not so recent statistic says around 40% of couples match up online, but I'd say current day in 2023, most people meet online. My instincts tell me that this can be good. Love was already a pretty hard thing to achieve, or as we prefer to refer to it, fall into, like it's something that happens to us if we're lucky enough. But Erich Fromm, a German social psychologist, argues in his 1956 book, The Art of Loving, that love is a personal choice. Much like the title of the book indicates, he says that love is an art to be mastered over a long period of time, just like any other skill, and something that is continually worked on. But of course, that does not really reflect the reality we are living in today, especially since it feels almost impossible to find the right person for that in the first place. Okay, enough tomfoolery. Let's get into the video, shall we? You know, it feels like it's become rarer to find people in my generation, more specifically Generation Z, or by extension millennials, that are looking for a long-term relationship. It makes me feel kind of alienated and without much options to choose from, but I know that's sort of an illusion because I feel that most people would prefer long-term relationships to hookups any time of the day. They just can't find the right person for that. So they settle for the second best thing, or even the third best thing, which is usually a cope of some sort. Probably porn or parasocial relationships or fiction, anything you want, really. There's a lot of options to choose from today. A lot of relationships today feel selfish, like we start them for ourselves instead of, celebrating another human's presence in our world. Like we deserve to receive love, we think we deserve to receive love, but we are unable to give it ourselves. And anyways, what does love even mean? It's a feeling, I guess. And no, knowing what love is and being able to describe it doesn't really prevent us from experiencing, the magical, supernatural, wondrous wonders of love. Goodness gracious. In fact, I'd say it's quite the opposite. Being able to describe what love is makes us able to love even deeper. Just like understanding happiness usually makes us happier, or like understanding that goofy ass noise in your car makes you a better driver. Sometimes. To me, love starts as a biological phenomenon. Yes, of course, it is a feeling in the first place. But the way we view this feeling, this tingling sensation in our chest, is heavily dependent on the culture we were born in. We have a weird conception of love today that usually comes from the media that surrounds us, especially social media. For Gen Z, I'd argue that social media is at least half of our environment, if not more. If we're all chronically online, I guess it is our environment. So of course we have a weird idea of love, and because of that, because we have this weird idea of love, it changes our perception on how we pursue relationships and how we view our own relationships, which is really detrimental if you look at the statistics. It seems that we are so starved of love today. It's something that we need to have to be happier, to be a part of society, to be a part of the group, to become more accepted and to fit in. We are constantly surrounded by reminders that if we are not in love right now, then we are definitely missing out. Just pick your poison, right? Movies, TV shows, social media, music. It's rare to find a piece of media that does not mention a form of romance or attraction. And even more, the representation of love is not in line with what reality is. It's something more attuned to the infatuation phase, or the honeymoon phase as it is referred to in pop psychology. Actually, that kind of makes sense considering that media is always an exaggeration of reality and not reality itself. That's why we like it so much. And this creates a sort of high expectation on what love should be. If it is not like those expectations, then you are not in love, you're a fake. Social media is especially good at breaking already healthy relationships. It's normal to become overly obsessed with the idea of finding the perfect partner when we're constantly fed this idea in our heads daily. We're allowed to think like that because we think that's true, that it is possible. We'll find the person who will complete us and make us feel free and whole and whatever else that we need from that person. It's good to take care of our well-being, but we need to understand if we are actually taking care of our well-being by doing these kinds of things to ourselves. If love is an art, like Erich Fromm argues, then love is a choice. Love is more about being the right partner, especially after the initial infatuation phase already passes. You're deciding to commit yourself to one person fully, with all your flaws and insecurities exposed out in the air. And that's really hard. Like, I hate that. But, if we want to pursue profound relationships, we kind of have no choice but to expose ourselves to a world of hurt. And if it's a good relationship, it goes both ways. So, you can keep another person's secrets, right? Don't blackmail, please. I think that seeing the development of character in a person is one of the best parts of being in a relationship. Growing mature together and learning new things together, new ways of seeing reality from, another person's perspective, which is amazing. No relationship just works out if no one is willing to change or compromise within it. If you're not willing to compromise, then why are you here? Why are you talking to another person? You're just trying to make another version of yourself. And we sort of misunderstand other people's love as a feeling where they would do anything for you, as something of pure dedication to another person instead of an exchange like it should be. Fromm argues that if we see love as something that randomly happens to us instead of something that we are truly responsible for, of course we'll fall in and out of relationships all the time because we can fall out of love just as easily as we fell into it. I love how Fromm sees love. But really, love like this is rare to find today because it goes against what reality is right now. It's hard to find this kind of love and the right person to pursue this kind of love with in the first place. A lot of us don't want love like this. We want something to present to other people, something ideal. We want to be able to say that we have a significant other. But when it comes down to it, we love a person for their attributes and the value we give them, what they provide to us, not for who they are as a person specifically. It is much harder to make people interested in ourselves than to be curious about other people. But we still go for the former option. Now, everything I just talked about was fine and dandy, of course. But goodness gracious, that is if you're able to find a match in the first place. What if you refuse to use dating apps? Then you're essentially isolating yourself from 50% of the dating market, if not more. Most definitely more. Our relationships before the internet were formed well through our surroundings because, we couldn't communicate with people from far away except for phone numbers we already knew. We met through friends or family or through shared public spaces where interaction with strangers was deemed okay. And even if we never talked to a person directly, we could still develop an interest because we saw them in person first. We saw their unique way of squirming about in this world. And even if we were too anxious to talk to them in person, good heavens, then we could at least send a love letter like the fine gentleman we are, or just ask their friend for the number or something. But unfortunately, real-life communities are starting to disappear today. 33% of the population in 1990 had 10 close friends, which is a lot of friends. But it's only 13% in 2022, a 20% decline in, 30 years? 12% say they have no close friends, compared to 3% in 1990. And that's taking into account the whole population, the entire population, not just the younger generation, which has probably been affected a lot since the start of the pandemic and everything else that separated us. If people have less friends, then they will meet less new friends and make less big friend groups. Friend groups will get much more tight-knit and less open to outside interactions. We will have no choice but to turn to the internet to have a sense of community with other human beings, which we absolutely need. This kind of explains why people are turning to the internet even more. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy of some sort. The internet, unfortunately, is not an accurate representation of real-life human connection. It's something more akin to the concept of hyperreality, which I discovered very recently, actually. It was first coined by Jean Baudrillard, a French-German literature translator turned sociologist. He defined hyperreality as the generation by models of a real without origin, which translated to less smart person talk means that we essentially see simulations of reality as more real than reality itself. Kind of feels familiar, doesn't it? Even if it was first used in a book from 1981, I feel that it applies even more today when we are all chronically online. We are able to choose what we send to others, what we present to others through texts, images, and videos. We become an idealized version of ourselves, a hyper-reality version of ourselves. And we start to see other people through that lens as well. The more time we spend on the internet, the more we are unable to distinguish it from the real world, and thus it becomes our real world, a world that exaggerates all our flaws and qualities to a black and white spectrum. Dating apps are a great example of this. We find ourselves with much more choice for partners than ever before at the touch of our fingertips. But at the same time, because of that huge amount of choice, we tend to make much less choice or are more fickle on our choices. And that's pretty normal human psychology behavior. It's choice paralysis, really, which is when we are presented with way too much choice that we can't make any choices. Looking at the statistics on dating apps, it's clear that women have the clear advantage in this kind of situation, and that can convince them that they will find the perfect match eventually. It's kind of understandable, really. If it feels like I'm able to find the perfect person and they're within my grasp, then of course it'll feel like I'm betraying myself when I'm settling for something lesser. So we make a list of high standards or red flags, which these kinds of apps do enable. You know those preferences, those dating preferences that we choose at the start? Yeah, those feel like standards or red flags to me. We can describe all our preferences, from if we are a cat or a dog person, or astrology sign, perfect compatibility match, or even if we are more of a twink than a daddy. They give us a big list of red flags to choose from. We don't even have to choose ourselves. And that can create dating preferences that we didn't have before, which is another problem these apps enable. Men, on the other hand, are thrown into a big competition against each other. They outnumber women on those dating apps, and they don't have a lot of matches compared to women, so they have much less selection. They can become increasingly more desperate to the point they'll sell their soul for a single crumb of coochie. Good grief, my fellows. It can do a number on your self-esteem, because essentially you have no value if you don't have a like. This has the backwards effect of creating a pool of young men that become increasingly resentful because they don't have any dating experience in a world where that's everything. We on both sides lose in this kind of situation. So relationships end up where they are today. Everyone and everything is becoming a commodity in a market. Just the terms dating market and sexual market value suggest just that. It's all about becoming this perfect person first before entering this market, because otherwise you have no value and you'll get no hoes. I'm not a fan of this way of referring to the dating world because it reduces humans to materialistic thing. We are things to be sold on a market to each other. We're reducing ourselves to our appearance and our quirky list of personality traits, or how good we look in photos we take of ourselves. Is it about becoming yourself or finding another person that is trying to become themselves? Or is it about molding ourselves to fit other people's standards? We want to get into love not because of its profound significance on our existence, but because we want to take part in this love thing that everyone else is talking about. There's nothing wrong with taking care of your appearance, eating healthy, exercising, and loving yourself. Those are great for building your self-confidence. But at the same time, that confidence depends on how you look to other people and how they validate you. You start to care more about how you look to others than your own character. You start to value yourself more based on those principles. And without realizing, you can start doing that to other people as well. You could be doing these things to simply increase your value as a human being, which sort of suggests that you had no value before that. That is kind of self-destructing, if you ask me. Have you ever sat in your bed, sad and lonely, thinking, if someone could just hug me right now, all my pain would go away? Yeah, that's me. But there's something interesting about the thought that getting into a relationship would fix all your life problems. It would fill a hole in your heart somewhere. A lot of people can come into relationships just to fulfill a certain void inside of them. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to feel special and unique. We want to become a better person through having a relationship, because that comes into our idea of a happy person. A lot of people enter relationships to fulfill that void, but end up with a gap much larger than before, because they realized nothing has changed since getting into a relationship. In my case, it made my life much worse. I guess it's what first motivated me to look at myself more honestly. So I can be grateful for that, at least. It made me realize that I haven't become a better person. I stayed the same essentially. And it's even more damaging when you change your outward appearance to get into relationships, because you realize that that's the only thing people value about you. It's not like your inner problems or your existential anxiety will fix itself once you say you're in a relationship or once you lose your virginity. At the same time, saying this to people who haven't gotten that experience yet falls on deaf ears, because you do need that experience to realize that. A lot of these issues comes from an individual not knowing themselves enough. And relationships cannot fix that. If you do not know yourself well enough, then it's inevitable that you will eventually face walls that you cannot see through because you cannot identify your problems. Inevitably, we have to start self-reflection instead of changing our physical world all the time. We have to create a meaning of some sort to hold on to, lest we want to fall into the void. If that's your cup of tea, well, go for it. It's kind of nice sometimes. I've recently come across an idea that was able to put my scrambled thoughts about preventing this void in the first place, and that's called the art of being alone. And much like the set of word indicates, it's about learning to enjoy time with yourself, not being afraid of being alone in the dark void of your thoughts. Even as a person that values their relationships over much of everything else in my life, I like this idea that you can be alone without feeling lonely, without needing someone to distract me from myself. It makes you naturally more curious about people and truly able to enjoy the time you spend with them, instead of using them as a distraction for whatever personal issues you're going through. To be truly comfortable with being left in solitude is to be confident in yourself and the part you play in this world. You can enjoy life without needing someone to validate your choices or someone to share it with. Of course, I love sharing the happiness of my life with the people I love, but most people do not care about the things that you do, and they shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to either. Relationships can and do enhance our abilities to live our lives, but that's if they're established correctly. They can just as easily ruin our lives. Saying all this, there's also a quiet resignation going on with many people who are simply unable to find someone that satisfies them. There are a lot of people who are okay with staying single long term due to lack of experience and feeling more hope in being alone. We have such good coping mechanisms today for loneliness and isolation that we can essentially distract ourselves forever. There's also a big trend going on with people romanticizing their lives alone, buying houses alone, spending quality time alone, becoming self-sufficient without depending on anybody. It truly shows how individualistic Western society has become. A lot of studies have shown that having a social life, friendships, and being a part of the community are actually big predictors for life expectancy, and by correlation, happiness as well. Of course, it's worse to feel lonely surrounded by a lot of other people than being comfortable alone. But there are times when we do need these things in our lives, when we do need to depend on other people. A lot of things have contributed to this increasing amount of loneliness today, and it's not really anybody's fault. We all created the systems ourselves. We need more room today for unintentional social interactions than ever before. Resigning from any relationship in our lives can definitely make the problem worse though, even if it's sort of a consequence from the problem in the first place. Do we even have a choice but to resign if we want to be happy though? Looking at the dating market myself, I don't want to play a part in it, and I don't want to contribute to it at all. Every time I've downloaded these dating apps before, my instincts were always telling me that it feels so materialistic and so dehumanizing in a way. It's like I'm selling my soul to be a part of something I need, but it just makes me feel worse in the end. Unfortunately, making this choice to resign leaves my relationship potential to real-life encounters, which are much less likely to happen today. I'm not giving up, of course, but we have to acknowledge that it is getting harder before we do anything else. We shouldn't have to resign from dating or from trying to find a partner in the first place. But when it feels like you're going against your own values, like you're molding yourself to be a part of something that everyone tells you need to have, it feels like it's not worth it at all. Do you want to love yourself or be loved by other people? Even with me being a part of the resignation crowd, I still want to believe from. I want to believe that love is my own choice, that it is my own responsibility, no matter how the world is today, even with all its consequences. That love is intentional, that it is something you have on purpose, is an idea that strikes me as true. And the fact that marital satisfaction declines when children are born and improves when the children leave the home helps me convince myself of that, because the purpose of that couple changes from love to responsibility to love again. I just feel like I'm not ready yet to love someone else fully. I'm still too curious about my own life and the life I'm living to dedicate a big part of it to someone else. We need to know ourselves well enough in the first place to be able to trust ourselves with loving another person. Love is made up of our actions, after all. To find and celebrate the good parts of someone, to assist them in times of need, to bring order in their lives when there's chaos, and to inspire and influence them to become a better version of themselves. You need to be ready for those things at least. I say that it is possible to be happy in your life just knowing that someone else exists, but it's hard, especially with all the roadblocks in the way, namely the death of community and the increasing amount of people being chronically online. But it is possible. We are still the same humans that have existed for the last 10,000 years or so. We still desire the same basic things. Even if it's become harder now, nothing will change that. But honestly, the problem is always much bigger than I am capable of describing in a single video. The problem is with how we view success, with how we view happiness, with how we view life satisfaction and fulfillment, and with how we view ourselves and others. There's a lot of layers to this problem. The way we think about relationships today is just a consequence from all these other things that completely changed our way of thinking. And these all come from systems we ourselves created. Anyways, that's all I have for today, but I'll be back.